All right, so I'm right here. Welcome to another interview, Offbeat Podcast. Right here, I'm your host Jorge Ambriz, and today I have an awesome opportunity, privilege to be able to interview. This is for the first time that we actually interview a defense attorney from right here from California, and I'm going to introduce him. I'm going to read his bio, just so you can kind of get a taste of what we're going to be talking about today. I believe we have some very interesting topics that we're going to touch on. But Gregory H. Kassel was born and raised in San Bernardino, California. And that's where our podcast is from, right here from San Bernardino, California. He went to San Bernardino High and graduated from Pacific High School, all right, in 1981. Gregory was following his father throughout California from the time he was 10 years old and watched him perform trials throughout California. Gregory went to the University of Denver and graduated with a political science degree in 1985 and went to law school in San Diego, California, passing the bar in 1991. He then joined his father and brother in Kassel and Kassel Law Office. Gregory handles all criminal defense and administrative proceedings and has handled a multitude of high-profile cases. He is a past president and treasurer of Inland Trial Lawyers Association and a member of all federal courts and the United States Supreme Court. A petition for a writ, and I don't know if I can pronounce this correctly.
Certiorari.
There you go. Was sent to the United States Supreme Court by Attorney Kassel. Gregory is a member of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyer, rated 10 best attorneys by the American Institute of Criminal Attorneys, and recently awarded Best DUI Lawyer in the Inland Empire by the Sun Telegram for 2021. Kassel and Kassel is AV rated by Martindale, Hubble Preeminent Attorneys. He serves on a multitude of philanthropy organizations, including UKIPA's mock trial team as an instructor. So let's give it up for Greg Kassel.
Greg Kassel, nice to see everybody.
All right. So, Greg, thank you so much for agreeing to this interview. And also special thanks to Bernie Dybel, right? Wild Mouse Design. And thank you so much for setting this up. And how long have you been working with Bernie?
With Bernie for the last 8 months.
Okay.
And he's fantastic and does a great job.
Yeah. He was a pleasure meeting. I'm so glad that you were able to put this together. But today is my first time, interviewing an actual defense attorney. So for me, it's a great pleasure, and I believe we're gonna learn a lot today. I'm gonna learn a lot. Our audience is gonna learn a lot, and you've dealt with a lot of different situations, I'm sure, right?
Absolutely.
And I think the first one, right, that even you were rated top defense attorney for 2021 on this subject was, and I know it's a situation that many people don't necessarily plan on being in that situation, but DUI. Let's talk about that.
Well, driving under the influence doesn't necessarily mean alcohol. It can be drugs. And a lot of people say, well, gee, I had NyQuil. Well, NyQuil's alcohol. It doesn't matter whether it's a prescription medication.
Yeah.
It can be anything that is putting you under the influence of alcohol that impairs your driving.
Yeah.
California has a .08 standard for alcohol, and all that means is it creates a legal presumption that you're under the influence if you're at a .08 or higher. And you can rebut that presumption. You have the opportunity to have a blood or a breath test. We no longer have urine tests in the state of California, unfortunately. The most important thing with a DUI today is to set your Department of Motor Vehicles hearing within 10 days of your citation. If you fail to do that, you will lose your license for 1, 2, or 3 years, depending on whether it's a first offense, second offense, third offense, fourth, or whether there is a refusal to take a blood or breath test. You must accept to take a blood or breath test, or you will lose your license for a period of 1, 2, or 3 years automatically. But the officers have to read you verbatim the admonition from the DMV checklist in order to have that. So don't think just because you didn't take a test or you said you wouldn't take a test that there's no way to prevail at the Department of Motor Vehicles. They have to tell you that your license will be lost for 1, 2, or 3 years. Not that it may, might, or could be taken, or gee, they're going to take this. They have to read the admonition, so make sure they do that.
And how many people have you come across or cases that you've come across that have actually known that? I didn't know that.
Very few people understand the issue with a refusal. They simply say, if I don't take a test and they can't prove that I'm a .08 or higher, therefore I prevail. That's not the case. DMV will hurt you with your driver's license. And depending on whether you're a commercial driver, suddenly you drop to a .05 standard, or if you're a minor below the age of 21, the standard is a .01. So it becomes substantially different depending on your status. And I've always had a problem with that with commercial drivers, because if you're an airline pilot or a train engineer or someone of that stature, you can still get your license back. But if you're at a .05, even if you're in a normal automobile on a Friday night when you're pulled over, you will lose your commercial license for a period of 1 year without a restricted license.
Yeah. Just to kind of put into perspective, when talking about alcohol, right? Driving under the influence of alcohol, a .08, like what does that compare to?
Well, the average mixed drink, for example, depending on your body weight, depending on whether you're hypoglycemic or diabetic, is about .025 to .03 per drink. So if you just do the math, I'm at 2 drinks, I can be as high as an 06, as low as an 05. If I have 3 drinks, I'm as high as an 09. So you really want to kind of limit your drinks. And you peak at about an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes.
Right.
If I drink a quart of vodka right now, the entire quart, and you take my blood right now, it's .00. Now, I may be dead in an hour and 45 minutes.
I think a lot of people probably, maybe, like you said, the body weight has a big thing to do with it.
Sure, if you're thinner and your metabolism burns fast, you're able to burn through alcohol a lot faster. Usually the average drink is out of your system after 3 hours. So if you're at 3 hours, that's why the Department of Motor Vehicles has a 3-hour presumption that they have to show driving was in 3 hours of the time of the test. A lot of people don't know that. Because if they can't show that, they can't meet the presumption standard that there's actually driving within 3 hours, because they don't know where you were at 3 hours prior in terms of your alcohol level.
And so driving under the influence, like you mentioned earlier, it's not just alcohol, it's medication. And now one of the big things right now in California is, they've legalized marijuana, recreational marijuana. So in that sense, how do they prove that?
It's very nebulous working with marijuana, because there's not a set standard in the state of California as to how many nanograms of marijuana is necessary to be under the influence. It becomes a very subjective standard, and there are experts in every regard in terms of where you're at. So you highly suggest that you seek a lawyer if you're arrested for a DUI with marijuana, because it's something that can be fought.
Because that's one of the things that always comes to my mind. Because, you see the signs and it's like DUI, drive drunk or drive high, you're still a DUI, things like that. And it's like, well, how do they have a test for that?
Well, they will generally say that he was driving impaired, either weaving or going. They have to show some probable cause to stop and detain the person to begin with. So what was the violation of law for stopping the individual that's there? With marijuana, there will be field sobriety tests that they do. They'll do a nystagmus test, which is an eye test, which is very questionable in the state of California as to whether they'll even allow it in as evidence. But they will use that as to make a determination whether someone is under the influence of marijuana, as well as other field sobriety tests, heel to toe, finger to nose, stand at attention. I am NHTSA certified, which is a National Association for Highway Safety. I've been through classes to get that. And there's certain standards that CHP will be looking for
Right.
when they put the individual through the field sobriety test. But
Yeah.
at my age, I'm not sure that I could do any of the field sobriety tests on any given day.
Yeah. So that's right, because there's a lot of physicalities too that with these tests, and
Sure.
and so it just comes to that question where a lot of people are probably, even that what you said about the alcohol, like there's that 3 hour window. What's that window going to be for someone who does that recreationally? So it's just an interesting subject, and it kind of brings me to the other one, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, but when it comes to a DUI, if they don't meet that 10-day window, right, with the DMV, how can that affect, and what are the consequences
You
for that?
lose your license right after that. So if you're a standard first offense, it would be a 4-month suspension. If you have a refusal, it's a 1-year revocation. If you're a second offense, it will be 1 year. If you're a second offense refusal, it'll be 2 years.
Wow.
3 years, it even gets worse. And 4 years, it's or fourth offense, I should say, becomes significantly different. So by setting your DMV hearing, you can also put a stay on your license, meaning that you will have a license up until the time of your hearing. So if the hearing is 3 months down the road, you can continue to drive. So everybody wants to be able to drive. And so that gives them the opportunity to drive their vehicle, but you have to set that hearing and get on it. That little pink piece of paper that they provide you when they arrest you, unfortunately, only talks about the 10 days in the middle of the page in small print. So people don't tend to read it.
Yeah. And that's the thing I've always said about, I've been in some legal situations myself in the past, not anything related to DUI, but just in the past. And, and that's one of the things that I always tell people is that, like, it's the fine prints that we miss a lot of times. I think that's why a lot of people, when they get into these situations financially, that it can take a toll on them because all these consequences begin to happen, right?
Certainly. And lawyers are not cheap, but it's much cheaper than losing your license, having your car impounded, having a suspended license, and having additional fines. If you can lower a DUI just to an alcohol-related reckless, you save thousands on insurance over the next 4 or 5 years. So it becomes very, very significant for many jobs. And I've represented police officers, judges. I've represented their kids. And when this happens, it's important to get it as low as you possibly can, if not just flat out dismissed.
Yeah. So, and I think that's why it's so important that we have this conversation here today with you, because I think a lot of people, again, it's not something that maybe people plan for. It's not something that people say, hey, I'm going to go out today and I want this to happen. I'm going to have a good time and this is going to happen to me. Nobody plans it. But in those situations, how important is it? And you answered it a little bit right now, but how important is it to go, even if it's just to consult with a defense attorney like yourself?
I think it's absolutely important. And you also find situations where people are injured in DUIs and some where they're killed. And when that happens, you can be facing, a murder charge or significant prison time if there's what is referred to as GBI, great bodily injury, when someone is injured in a DUI. So you want to seek counsel right away.
Yeah. What are some of the things and some common practices that you see that are maybe abused in the system when it comes to a DUI arrest? What are some of the most common things you see?
The thing that's very frustrating is that they'll provide a citation with a date to appear. And sometimes these people appear and the case isn't filed, so they think, aha, I'm home free. Not realizing that on a misdemeanor DUI, they have 1 year to file. On a felony, they have 3 years.
Wow.
So they may file this thing down the road and issue a warrant, and the person may not even know. They may never get a letter or anything else. A lawyer can check and stay behind it to avoid someone being picked up at work or somewhere else and being embarrassed for something that happened, a year or so earlier.
Wow. Yeah, I did not know that. I mean, I've seen situations like that in other cases where, like you mentioned, they appear and then there's nothing there, or they're constantly going on the San Bernardino County website to check on case status to see.
This happens all the time with just standard arrests. People get arrested. The DA, district attorney, has 72 hours to file charges or the person gets blue sheeted, meaning they get released. So a lot of people think, aha, they're not filing my case. Everything's great. No, they can file that case almost 9-10 months later or more, get rearrested, and then be facing a bail. And if they would have taken care of it at the beginning, they would avoid all of that.
Wow.
So get a lawyer.
Yeah. Don't drink and drive, but get a lawyer if anything like that happens, right? And then any other things that you see that in the arrest process that helps you in your case that you say, man, like this should have been handled differently.
Well, certainly. I mean, there's a multitude of rules that people don't think about. A breath test, for example, when they use it, it has to be calibrated. They have to show the calibration every 10 days or every 100th person or whichever is sooner. And if they don't have that, you win. So a lot of people think, oh, man, I'm a 1.8. I can't possibly prevail. Well, try asking for the calibrations, because if they haven't calibrated the machine in a year, you may prevail. So a lot of people don't ask for it. And it's very easy to ask for it. Can I have the calibrations?
Wow. Yeah. Is there a case that maybe stands out to you for a certain DUI or maybe most recent?
Certainly. I remember trying a DUI case 3 times. It was 11-1 for guilty, 11-1 for not guilty, and 6-6 on the third case.
Same case?
Exact same case. They finally dismissed the case, but I had to fight hard to get there. But the thing that happened that assisted us is the CHP officer, while conducting field sobriety tests, fell into the jury box. And so I got to say, I know this is a lot more difficult here on the carpet and the light and the air conditioning as opposed to on the side of the road at 3 a.m. in the dirt and rain, and you're trained at this, and obviously my client's not. And things like that can really assist in a trial. So, I've had that happen, and oddly enough, that same CHP officer pulled my wife and I over going to the airport some 3 weeks later and let us go. He said, "Not you again, Kassel."
Wow,
let me go.
So moving on to another area that's it's a very touchy subject, I know, for a lot of people, but it is something that you practice and you defend against, and it's domestic violence cases.
Yes. In domestic violence cases, people must realize that even if the spouse is willing to say, I wasn't hurt, I wasn't injured, this didn't happen, they can still proceed on with the case. It can assist to have that. The other thing they have to be aware of is that every time the district attorney will seek a restraining order. And most of the time, one or both of the parties were merely inebriated and realize later their mistakes and don't wish to press charges and don't want a restraining order. But if the person appears in court without the significant other at that time, the restraining order is going to get issued. So you want to try to circumvent that order, have the spouse write down that they were not hurt or injured, that they don't wish to prosecute, or there was mutual combat or what happened, but obviously tell the truth. And a lot of people try to lie about things, and that puts them in a worse scenario on a domestic violence case. But again, a lot of times they won't file those instantaneously, letting the person out of custody, and they think they're home free when they're not. They file the case 8-9 months later.
And that's where I've seen that situation happen, is on the domestic violence cases. And that's when I learned what you were mentioning right now, that many times, I think now, and maybe you can tell us kind of when that changed, was if they don't need the spouse or whoever the domestic violence was done against to press charges.
I think laws changed dramatically after the O.J. Simpson case. That really put some federal and state funding behind it, and they really wanted to press to avoid domestic violence. And now, if there is a call to our local police department, no matter who calls, if they show up, someone's going to jail. In fact, that's what they were told. So if you call the police on a domestic violence and then later say, hey, everything's okay, we've settled our differences, no problem, they're going to arrest you. You're taken in.
Man.
And at that point, you have a problem. The other thing that people don't realize is even on a misdemeanor domestic violence, you lose your license. You lose your ability to have a firearm in the state of California for 10 years, and it becomes a federal ban for life.
Wow.
Even on a misdemeanor.
Wow.
And so you lose your ability to purchase firearms. So those of you that love firearms, you don't want a DV case on your record. Felony charges will arrive when the injuries are significant enough.
Yeah.
In order to have what is referred to as a Penal Code 273.5, there has to be, to begin with, an appreciable injury under what is referred to as the Abrigo case. And what that means is more than a mere red mark. So if there's something more significant, they'll go from misdemeanor land to felony land. And if it's super serious, then they file what is referred to as a GBI, great bodily injury, which adds 3 years to any offense that they charge. And there can be additional offenses with that, such as 422 criminal threats, other charges that bring more jail time and incarceration.
Yeah.
So you want a lawyer.
And is that always an attempt to pile on charges, so that eventually that person can just, snap and say, let me cut a deal?
Well, you never know what a jury's going to do at any given time, especially in San Bernardino or Riverside counties.
Yeah.
You don't know what they're going to believe or who they're going to believe
Right.
On a case. So sometimes a disposition may be in the best interest of the party, but they have to make that determination. But certainly if you're in felony land looking at prison and you have maybe a GBI adding another 3 years and suddenly you can get a misdemeanor and avoid jail time, that's something to at least think about.
Right. Yeah. With cases like this, when it comes to domestic violence, when it typically involves male on female or vice versa, what do you typically tend to see? Is it more male on female?
I would say that 80% to 90% are male on female, but I've represented and do represent currently a multitude of females. And it's always funny to have a female that's 4 foot tall with her husband at 6'4" that is claiming he was beat up.
Yeah.
But sometimes it also delves into the family law case where they try to utilize it for things such as property or for visitation or for custody. And so sometimes it's used as a tool in the family law court.
Yeah. Is there any cases that kind of come to your mind or things that to look out for when it comes to these, when you're being accused of domestic violence even? What are some of the things that you see?
Well, I tend to see a lot of these that go into the family law court. So the first thing I'll always ask is, what is your relationship like now? Because they're always coming in a week or so after the event. Is she trying to contact you? Is she seeking a divorce? Are you going through a custody issue? What are the issues? Is she for you or against you?
Yeah.
Where does it stand? And if a person is truly adverse and not wanting to assist the party, the best is to leave them alone, because they can be dissuading a witness, other charges filed, and suddenly you're looking at no bail on a case and sitting behind bars. So if the person doesn't want to talk to you about the events or doesn't want to address letters or anything else, leave them alone.
Yeah. Some great advice, for hopefully no one ever, has to end up in that situation. But that's why you need a defense attorney, definitely, because it does sound like a lot of things, do work against our favor because of ignorance.
Absolutely.
Right? Not knowing the laws, not knowing the approach, of the prosecution, what's going to happen, even just simply the 72-hour hold, if charges aren't pressed in 72 hours, I'm really, okay, I'm scot-free, and they go back with this person and not knowing there's a restraining order there or, and then it's sad because then an argument sparks again, maybe, 2-3 months down the line, and well, hey, you shouldn't have been here. You have a restraining order.
Realize that the other spouse or the other cohabitant holds a lot of power. They
Yeah.
hold the keys to freedom, and all they
Yeah.
have to do is make a phone call and say that person threatened me, or
Yeah.
that person's doing this, this, and this, and they're picked back up again, and
Yeah.
they're looking at no bail.
Yeah. Another area that is also a very touchy subject that you guys also help practice and defend. You guys defend, I'm sorry, are child abuse cases.
Sure. In child abuse cases, and they also stem into sexual abuse cases, there are a multitude of factors that become very important in terms of trying to have bail lowered or trying to address the issues. One, for example, if there's sexual abuse, oftentimes they'll want what is referred to as a 288.1 report, or report to see whether or not the individual has continued sexual possibilities of injuring children in the future, or abuse in the future. And it's always good to have an attorney that will have their own psychologist, their own medical personnel, people that will look at it in a favorable light. That doesn't necessarily mean you always get a favorable report,
Yeah.
but it means that at least they'll look at all of the issues that will assist.
Yeah.
In the abuse situations, again, I tend to see those a lot, and it's always a red flag for me whenever there is a custody battle
Yeah.
going on in family law court. It always makes a red flag when they've never seen an abuse, sexual or otherwise, and suddenly
Right.
there's this custody battle,
Yeah.
and they're coming out of the woodwork with it.
Yeah.
It's very difficult if a child comes forward and says, he touched me or she touched me, but
Yeah.
sometimes the parental coercing of a
Right.
child can make them say what you want them to say,
Yeah.
and you have to look out for that.
Yeah. It's a very sad way that people choose to fight their battles, especially when it comes to
To use the
custody,
children.
to use the
Sure.
children. It really is, And you know what? One of the things that I wanted to ask, and I was going to ask it for the domestic violence, but I think I'd rather ask it for this, is in these situations though, how important is it for you, Greg, to, of course, be professional and to put the personal to the side? Because I'm sure you're a dad, right?
Sure, no,
Husband.
absolutely. And I mean, if you truly see an abuse situation and it's there, then obviously you want to do everything you can to assist, and having anger management classes, battery classes,
Yeah.
child raising classes, other forms of treatment for the individual can
Yeah.
assist. And the courts like to see that.
Yeah.
I don't think the courts necessarily want to lock everybody up. And there's a fine line. When I was a child, if I went and did something in school, teachers had paddles with and boards that they'd use to swat your rear. You can't do that now.
Right,
Now the
yeah.
mindset is timeout, but I often ask people, is timeout working better today
Right.
than what happened in yesteryear?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not sure, but it's just what may be normal for some, and in some cultures may not be normal for us.
Right.
In some cultures, kissing on the lips is perfectly normal. Sometimes in our culture, we look at that. Why would anyone kiss a child on the lips?
Right.
It depends on the culture and how that individual is brought up and where.
Right. Yeah. So it's really important to put things into context, is what it sounds, right?
Sure.
And I think that's why a defense attorney is so important, seeking representation from a defense attorney like yourself, because a lot of times because kind of what the vibe that I'm getting, based off so far our conversation is that's what it kind of seems like, is like you like to partner with your clients in assisting them in any way, shape, or form. Because even what you mentioned right now is even not seeking so much the jail time, but even seeking other avenues of treatment
Right,
for
because
them.
if you don't, you're going to see recidivism, and
Yeah.
then when it comes back next time, it may be that much worse.
Right. Yeah.
So, and the DAs like to see that. They like to see treatment, the judges like to see that.
Yeah.
If you can do that, whatever may be the issue, be it alcohol, be it drugs, be it anger, whatever the issue may be,
Yeah.
counseling generally will assist.
Yeah. Do you ever look at a case where, or maybe they bring forth a case to you and they're seeking your help to represent them? And when you look at the facts of the case, do you ever turn anything down because you say, you know what, maybe this is too much?
Well, there are some cases that I've turned down. Sometimes I'll feel that there may be certain counsel, given the certain situation that may exist, that may be able to do better. And if that's the case, I'll tell them. If it's primarily one of a custody issue as opposed to a criminal issue, for example, I'll send them to lawyers that do just that.
Yeah.
And take them out of here. And it's not that I don't want to represent them. It's in their best interest.
Yeah. Because what's your mindset when it comes to representing clients? Because I know that for depending case to case, right? And especially nowadays with social media and everything that's going on. I mean, everyone is either guilty or not guilty based off public opinion. You know, and it's sad to say, but that's our culture nowadays.
I don't make those judgments.
Yeah.
I always do my best to represent the individual. Everyone's entitled to a fair trial, fair representation.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that they're going to necessarily be found not guilty. It
Right.
just means that we're going to look at all avenues that are best for the individual and best for the situation. At the same time, there are a lot of prejudices that exist right away. We've represented individuals from the Archdiocese, from the Catholic Church, and right away they think, oh, a priest did this. He must be guilty.
Automatically.
Without
Right.
understanding any of the facts of what's there. And sometimes there are a multitude of factors that can apply.
Right.
We've represented the second in charge in the DA's office in Los Angeles County, and right away they're thinking, well, this guy's got to be guilty. You cannot emphasize enough that there's prejudices that exist right away on certain cases.
Yeah.
Just before I got here was meeting with a client in one of those cases, and it's going to go to trial, and it's going to be a difficult trial, but he's looking at life, so we don't have a choice.
Drug cases.
Sure.
Right.
And with drug cases, the thing to find out is what type of drug is the person addicted to? And is it an addiction issue, or is it just trying to seek money and selling the drug?
Yeah.
Because if it's a lot of times there can be both going on, where someone is selling and addicted. And the idea, if you can get them into drug court or get alternatives to avoid incarceration or to avoid sales, that's a better way to go. And getting them off the addiction. And these days, the new drug of choice is fentanyl, and I've seen a lot of children and a lot of different people die from overdoses of the fentanyl. And trying to get them off of the drug of the day, and I've seen it go from heroin to speed to different things. And, ecstasy was a big thing for a while. Now we're on to fentanyl. Who knows what it will be tomorrow? But the idea is to get them off of the addiction.
Yeah. And what percentage would you say, that most are just from addiction?
I would say at least 50%, maybe even higher. Because if they were totally anti-drug, they wouldn't be selling it.
Exactly.
So if you can get them off of the addiction issue of it, they will oftentimes leave the issues of sale. And a lot of times the officers are dealing on complete hearsay of who has the drugs, because they pull over somebody and they tell them, we're going to give you a great deal if you just tell us where you got this, who supplied it, tell us what's going on. And then they would give up their mother to go home. So, they end up coming up with names, and suddenly the person's pulled over for no reason, and they're searching their cars for tinted windows or something that they're claiming is the probable cause to stop and detain. And they have to
Is that a probable cause?
No. It's a probable cause to stop, but whether or not it's a probable cause to actually search the vehicle becomes a different task. If you're pulled over for a minor infraction, they have to pull you over only long enough to write that infraction. So if you were speeding, for example, then write me a speeding ticket. If they say, well, gee, you look to be under the influence, that's a hunch. They don't have any articulable facts to say the person is. That might also be an issue that you raise in a motion to exclude evidence.
Gotcha. Yeah. So that's always been one of the things I've been very curious about is the part where I can understand if maybe they have a warrant to go into the house, they find drugs. It's a different, maybe a different situation, or maybe you can even touch on that. But when it comes to pulling over, what can they go off of to?
Well, to pull you over, it doesn't have to be a lot, but there has to be articulable facts to show that there's at least an infraction, some violation of law to get there. And when they pull you over for that reason only, it's usually a much better motion as opposed to someone that says this person was weaving and then I smelled alcohol, then I saw an open container, then I did tests, and subsequently I found they were under the influence, and when I opened their trunk I found drugs. The issue is it something where there is going to be inevitable discovery because of the arrest? They're going to impound the vehicle and find the drugs anyway? Or is there something to look at to show that's not the case?
Yeah. I get flashbacks from, back when I was young. And one of the things that was huge when I was growing up, this was in Las Vegas, but I know they had that here, was they had a unit called the gang unit over there in Las Vegas. And I mean, it came to pass where they no longer needed probable cause. If you look like a gang member, that was their probable cause.
The problem is that we in California have created a multitude of issues of vicarious liability for being in a gang. So, for example, if we were in a gang, for example, and you go out and shoot someone and they show that I'm part of this gang and attributing to the gang, they can charge me with murder along with you, because even if I didn't do anything to actually assist, and they're oftentimes trying to get that vicarious liability in our state. And we carry it to an extreme. There's what's referred to as a red line rule. For example, if I take you to a convenience store and unbeknownst to me, you rob the person, and I thought you were going to do a petty theft, but then I saw a gun and I thought nothing of it, and you went up and robbed the guy and came back in and I drove you away and you shot them dead, guess what they can charge me with? Murder.
Wow.
First degree. They're going to say it's a felony murder. They're going to say that I aided and abetted by taking you there and driving you away from the scene. So people have to realize in our state there are a lot of ways to be held vicariously liable. The best thing I can tell everybody is to shut up. If you're arrested, you have a right to remain silent. Try using it.
I think it's right away the fear of just, that maybe it was their first time being arrested, maybe their first time not knowing.
I consent to this search or I consent to this, everything's fine. That's not the case. Usually they talk their way into more charges.
What potential rehabilitation options here in Riverside County, San Bernardino, more the areas that you practice, what rehabilitation options do you seek out for individuals?
It's a tiny amount. There may be PC 1000 or which is a limited class for someone. Maybe they don't need a full-on drug court. Sometimes there can be individual counseling from Kaiser to other hospitals that if people can afford it. But if it's really bad, then we'll seek out the drug court, and there's different programs they can put them in. From Salvation Army to others that exist to get them off of the drugs. Some are live-in programs, some are not. And they'll test, and if they violate and use, they'll put them back into custody for a little while and take them back out. Kind of teach them that the better way is not to use.
Actually witnessed and seen a lot of cases go to, because I used to be part of a ministry called Victory Outreach. And so they have an in-house rehabilitation for men and women, depending the city, but mostly for men.
Victory Outreach.
Okay.
I'm aware of a multitude of programs that are
Yeah.
in the area to go to, and for fear of leaving one out, I won't start naming all of them. But,
Yeah, no, yeah,
but I've
definitely.
used just about every one of them
Yeah.
here in our county.
Yeah, we've been able to see some very successful cases, very good. I was actually, part of uh, the rehab program,
And that's
so
good because people like you will get out and assist others, because the addiction is really just a way of seeking help through other means. I always
hmm
tell people you got to have an out, whether it's riding bikes, or I fly RC planes and drones and copters, and
yeah,
that's my outlet, fishing and hunting, and people
yeah,
have to have an outlet.
yeah. Because especially now that marijuana is legalized now, you know, how many what are some of the things that you've seen with the changes of law, but that are still they're still kind of coming after that in a way? Well, what do you
Well, with
see?
marijuana, you see that a lot, because when I first started in the law, this much marijuana was a felony,
Yeah,
and people were going to prison for it.
yeah.
And
How do you
and
feel
and
about that? I'm sorry to
and
cut you off.
there are certain areas where marijuana can be very beneficial to the person with
Yeah,
certain medicinal issues.
right,
However, if someone is, for example, schizophrenic, the THCs affect them the opposite way and make them
right,
much worse.
right.
And a lot of people don't realize that. They think,
hmm
oh, he just used marijuana. Well, if that person is predisposed to the THCs,
Yeah.
they have adverse effects.
And so, what are some of the things that still come about though? Now that even though it's legalized recreationally, what are some of the things that are the problems the laws that are being broken, or cases maybe that you represent that
The
comes?
biggest thing that they need to do is, if they're going to have under the influence of marijuana, is to have a nanogram amount supplied. So if you drive at this much, it's deemed over the influence. They haven't done that.
Yeah,
So they need to change that.
yeah,
And it isn't necessarily just legal to have what you want, because I see people cultivating marijuana
right,
that still get charged. And if
yeah,
they have enough product and other things, they get taken in on a felony. So it's not that it's completely been eradicated as a crime. It's just they've limited that which will happen to certain individuals.
right, yeah. And I think that that's where the people that are in that wave of the marijuana thing, like they're still finding the loopholes of what they can get away with, what and there's just so much, I mean, that there you still see it, like especially in the city of San Bernardino. You constantly see, they found someone with a grow house, illegal grow house. You see them with they call them sesh events, what I mean, where they set up like underground events where they're selling. And so those type of things, like what could you what I mean, I don't know if you want to call it advice, or what can you kind of speak into that when it
Well,
comes to that?
a lot of people that are selling the marijuana in marijuana stores have to realize there are licensing issues that they have to go through to
Yeah.
be able to do that. Don't just set up shop.
Right.
Go and get your licensing and do it
Yeah.
properly. If you're going to do
Yeah.
it, realize that it's still frowned upon by the feds and the federal
Right.
government. So be careful as to where you do it.
Yeah. One of the things that I always think about are, when it comes to federal, and one of the things that has always scared me and used to always scare me were the RICO acts. And one of the things that I just constantly like look at is, it's like, even be careful who you're affiliating with, because I've seen cases. The most recent, it was a few years now, but it was a friend of a family, and it was just so sad how it went down for this individual. This person, he had no affiliation with this gang. He only knew one of the persons. He happened to go with that person on a day where the DA was doing surveillance on this apartment. They show him on surveillance showing up to that place with the other individual. That other individual got into an argument when someone, I think he was selling drugs or something, got into an argument. He chased him. Our known associate, our friend, saw what was happening and just tried to assist. So he gets out the car, runs after after the individual also, and so few months down the line, boom, they hit him with the RICO.
Be careful who you hang around with. That's
Yeah,
everything. That's what I told my kids when they were young in high school.
yeah, So be careful. Be careful who you're associating with, because that's the thing. It's still a federal offense, right?
And at any given time, I have cases involving RICO and anything like that. Most of the time, we have a scenario just like your friend, not involved, that were held vicariously for simply being at the wrong place at the wrong time and talking to the wrong people.
Yeah.
And sometimes that may just be their source of getting the narcotic. They're not necessarily the ones that are selling the
Yeah,
narcotic.
yeah, that was exactly the situation with him. But and it's a perfect moment to mention it. But the way he was able to beat that was because he got a defense attorney.
Sure, it's absolutely
Yeah,
important to have counsel that, have an idea of what's going on.
yeah. Have you been successful in any of those RICO cases?
Many of those cases, certainly, we have, and I've had federal cases as well that have been very successful. But it's important to take it on a case-by-case basis.
Right.
Who are you dealing with? A lot of times they're going to look at priors and other factors
Yeah.
as to how they treat those.
All right, and when it comes to the juvenile system, I know it's a whole different ballgame, right?
Right. One of the most important things in juvenile court is there's not the ability to have bail. So the most important thing is to hire an attorney immediately to get in there to try to get your child out of custody if they're in custody. And you want to get them out of there so you can solve the issues that are at hand.
Right.
And you want to have matters that can be sealed, or informal probation, or things that are not going to haunt them on their record forever and always.
Right. Yeah, that's a good. So I'm glad that we touched on that, because I know that even parents that may be in a situation when their son, their daughter might get into some trouble and not know what to do, but even a defense attorney.
Multitude of factors can apply to help out and assist, such as grades in school, such as counselors to write letters, teachers, people that know that student, and to get in there right away. Don't waste time.
Yeah, definitely. And then another subject too that your office is also handling also as well, right? Is the issue of immigration, right?
That's correct. In immigration cases, the criminal case can affect that immigration and make automatic deportation occur and do away with green cards and other ways of staying here in the country. And so it's very important not to have moral turpitude offenses, cases that carry over 364 days. Because if you have cases like that, or certain drug cases, you're going to have automatic deportation. So you want to be very careful to ask about the immigration consequences before you simply plead to a given charge.
Oh wow! And do you guys handle a lot of those cases, or do you have someone
we
else?
have attorneys that have worked with me over many, many years
Yeah.
to handle that, that has just as much experience as I do in criminal law in immigration.
Gotcha. And so when it comes to immigration law, though, do you guys just handle the criminal side of things, or do you guys also handle from?
We will do the criminal end of it, but we have attorneys that will in the office and associated with the office that will handle the immigration from start to finish.
Okay, that's perfect. That's really good to know, because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that might have gotten into some trouble, and their status might be up for questioning, So it's really good to know, because a lot of times I've seen situations like that where, and I'm not sure if it's changed. This was a few years back. But I would see situations where, they were pulled over without a license, without registration. And because they couldn't identify the individual, well, they had to book them into county. And while that booking process in county, I think it would take about 1 to 2 days, but immigration would come and put a hold on them.
One other thing I would tell people is, if you're put into custody and you're illegal in the country, bail out as soon as you can before the immigration hold takes place.
Yeah.
Get out of custody.
Yeah, because it
That will
happens.
assist you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because I've seen it. I have seen that personally with people where
Either
it's.
get the attorney to lower the bail or bail out.
Yeah.
Don't let that hold come on into effect.
Yeah. And how important is that part right there, just for any case, is how important is it to have have an attorney to fight to lower the bail. A lot of times people don't know that, right?
Right, because if you don't lower bail and you sit in custody, you may lose your job, you may have an immigration hold, you have a multitude of issues that only become worse.
Yeah.
And we have bail companies that we can have assist in getting you out of custody
Yeah.
and put you in contact with reputable bail companies.
There you go. So if you're ever in that situation like that or know somebody in that situation, let them know to fight, bail them out. And so that way they can avoid, because I've seen that so many times where the immigration holds and, 2-3 days later, it was just a simple traffic infraction. But then,
Suddenly you have a hold and you're sitting there for a long time.
Yeah. Molestation cases, right? Which
Sure.
kind of goes along with child abuse. We touched a little bit, but not too in depth. Let's touch a little bit about that.
Again, not to overemphasize the issue of custody, but that's always the first thing I look at for a motive because I see it so often.
Yeah.
But there are other things that can be done, such as polygraph examination, although they're not admissible in court. It's something that goes a long way with at least discussing the case.
Yeah.
And I've utilized that many times by having a polygraph and your own 288.1 report, your own medical reports. And I can't emphasize enough getting as many character letters as you possibly can from different people, anybody in law enforcement and those kind of things. If this is out of character, this isn't something you would do.
Right.
But you got to look behind what are the potential motives to lie.
Yeah.
And sometimes children can have certain events happen that they may deem are sexual, such as a pat on the rear. Oh, he touched my butt. Well, wait a minute. What was it that he did? He swatted to get in there.
Yeah.
It wasn't done for a sexual prurient interest.
Yeah.
So there are different reasons why they may come out. I always look for the motive for someone to lie. Now, if it's something that has happened, it's very critical to try to get it as minimal as possible, because if there's two or more individuals over a multitude of times, it becomes a life sentence. And we also have what is referred to as the sexually violent predator statute that applies. So if someone goes into custody, they serve their time, they're ready to get out, suddenly doctors feel that they're not appropriate to release because they have certain sexual activities, they won't let them out. They haven't gotten through testing to be released.
Wow.
So being well versed in the sexually violent predator statute, what that means and how those cases apply.
Yeah.
And molestation cases are super serious because they carry 3, 6, 9 years state prison and a lot more, depending on what activities have occurred.
Right.
Was there intercourse? Was there oral copulation? Was there just a touching? Is it one time, a multitude of times?
Yeah.
How old is the individual? Sometimes I had one, for example, where a gentleman meets a girl that was serving alcohol in a bar. So he assumes she's serving me alcohol. She's got to be 21,
yeah,
or more. The girl ends up being 17, and he ends up being charged with an offense. So although that doesn't become a molestation, that becomes a sexual battery or something.
With a minor.
They also refer to it as statutory rape, even though it's not a rape. Very liberal on abortion, but yet we have some of the strictest laws for what the age of consent is. So there's a mixed bag depending on where you're at.
Yeah.
What you can do in Louisiana is not necessarily legal in California.
But one of the things that always gets, and kind of relating the molestation or even like rape allegations and things like that is, when found, let's say a case goes and it's found that it was just false accusations. But by that time, an individual's reputation could have been smeared to the ground, right? Their life, their career could have been done. I just recently was reading a story about, I think it's Aaron Trevor. Oh my God, I can't. Baseball player for the Dodgers. He lost a $51 million contract. And it found out that his accuser was making it up. are there any remedies for that?
Well, certainly you can sue, and I've actually gone after
Okay.
people for doing that. The dilemma is, take your baseball example at $51 million. You can sue the party that made that, but I guarantee you that
They
party
won't
doesn't
have
have
it.
51 cents
No.
as opposed to $51 million.
Yeah.
So, your remedy is somewhat skewed by what they have. Now, I've gone after individuals that made these claims of malfeasance that were in real estate, and others that I know they have some monies, and we've prevailed.
Yeah.
But we don't tend to do that very often.
But there's no legal remedy for that, because I mean,
Well,
it's
technically, there is, in the sense that they are declaring under penalty of perjury that certain things are correct. They have to testify under penalty of perjury, and perjury is a straight felony. I just don't oftentimes see it utilized as being filed as the only charge against an individual. I'm not saying it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It's just rare.
because that's one of the things I've seen. Growing up, I remember a situation like that from someone very close to us, and it was very sad. Like this individual, he lost his job. The family financially, they took a hit. They couldn't post bail. Because it was they didn't have the money to post bail. So the individual had to stay in the county jail for I think about a year. While they fought this, and at the end of the day, it just turned out to be false allegations. And and it's like something like that. I mean, yeah, you move on, but I mean, it's like a stain that just stays there, on that individual. And then the individuals that made these accusations, like, what happens to them? And I feel, I don't know if you agree, but I feel like there's got to be some type of legal repercussion for those
That'd
type
be
of
nice
things.
if there would be, but a lot of times there's not, unfortunately.
Yeah. How can a person, when it comes to these molestation cases or even rape cases, what are some of the things that, when the accusation comes about, what and how they should handle?
Best thing I can tell them is to shut up. If you get a call from the alleged victim, oftentimes it's the police calling.
Wow.
And they're trying to record to get you to admit something. Daddy, if you just tell me you're sorry, this will go away. Okay, I'm sorry, dear. Well, that sorry becomes an admission. So
Wow.
the best thing I can tell people is to not make any statements whatsoever. Seek legal counsel immediately. There are things you can do to assist you. Polygraphs, as I said, are great, even though they're not admissible. It's something that can be utilized. If you fail it, no one has to know you took it.
Yeah.
They're not perfect machines, but they can be utilized as a tool.
Why are they not admissible as
Well,
evidence?
it's like every machine is not perfect. Throughout history, we want to say the space shuttle was perfect, it blew up. The Titanic was unsinkable, it sank. We want to say that the polygraph's perfect, it's not.
Yeah.
We probably won't ever develop a machine that's perfect.
Right.
We like to think we're there, but we're never there.
No. Well, I mean,
There's always errors and things that can happen.
Yeah.
And that's why they don't do it. And it's, how do you cross-examine a machine?
That's true. That's true.
But it is a tool, and the fact that someone's willing to take it goes a long way.
For example, if it goes to trial, how would you use that? How would you
You
utilize?
can't use it in a trial.
Not
and
even
it's
speak
not-
about it or
can't
say,
speak
hey,
about it. And,
hey, he was willing to take this.
No.
Wow.
It's not going to be admissible in trial, but it's something that can at least be utilized in negotiations and discussing the case.
What's the process, or what are some of the things that you see that maybe investigators or police or prosecutors fail to do when it comes to these
Biggest
cases?
thing is they just ask what happened and let them talk. The first thing I would be asking is, where did this happen? When did this happen? Who touched you? How many times? Who did you first tell about it? When you told that person, what did they do with it? Try to narrow it down to what took place. Officers are often trained to be very narrow and nebulous in these areas because they feel we don't want to get too involved with children in talking about that. But I don't see anything wrong with asking them who they talked to or where this took place or what happened.
Yeah.
Or they'll ask, did he touch you? Yes, he touched me. Well, and they'll leave it. Well, was that under the clothing, on top of the clothing? How long? Where did this happen at?
Yeah.
When did this happen? What did you do? Those questions are oftentimes ignored.
It really seems like it would be difficult to defend, I feel, because if it really is word versus word, I mean, how does...
And I have one now where the female has made this claim on 3 separate gentlemen.
Wow.
As she's seeking custodial issues and seeking monies in the family law court. And at a certain point, you got to say, hey, wait a minute. Did every one of these people, molest your children? Something's wrong.
And so how can they reach out to you? How can somebody... Where are you located?
I'm located at 1200 California Street in Redlands, and we're in Suite 260. It's very easy to find, just north of the freeway, 1 block, and you come up to the 2nd floor, and we're there.
Yeah.
And my email is Kassel with a K, Kassel, law office at C as in cat, S as in Sam.com. And my telephone number is 1-909-792-6455. So you can call us. We have answering services 24 hours a day. We answer our emails, and we don't charge anything to meet with you. So come on in.
A lot of times it's because we don't have the proper representation. It really is. A lot of times because we're ignorant to what rights we have and to how we can go about things, or even the process through the arrest that happened. There's a lot of times things that were violated, things that were supposed to happen that didn't happen, or even in court. And a lot of times, we want to save money and we want to do these things, but you know what? In situations where it's your life, when your life depends on it, your career depends on it, I recommend, you got an amazing defense attorney here.
Most criminal lawyers are not going to charge for their initial consultation. It's not a bad idea to get a couple of different opinions and at least talk with some lawyers that have been at it for a while.
Yeah.
Not necessarily someone that's the cheapest that's been doing it for 6 months.
Yeah.
But someone that's been doing it for 20 or 30 plus years.
Yeah. Because sometimes people feel that, money's the issue. I can't afford a defense attorney.
If they cannot afford, I would rather just have someone straight out tell me. I'll try to get them another lawyer that can do it a little bit more reasonably.
Yeah.
For them, but it's always a good idea to at least seek the attorney to talk to them, because it's free to do that.
Yeah, there you go. So don't give up. If there's something worth fighting for, then just get the consultation, and you never know. It can probably save you big headaches, right, Greg?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
all right.
if there's one thing I leave you with is leave your statements away and shut up.
Yeah.
Don't make any statements.
Yeah, there you go. And don't post about it.
Yeah. A lot of people get into trouble from that social media.
I'm telling you. Well, thank you so much, Greg. It was
no problem.
a pleasure. Thank you so much, Bernie. Thank you so much for Bernie Dybel. Thank you so much for setting this up. It was amazing. Thank you for having us here in your beautiful office. And it's right across, for everyone that's here from the Inland Empire, it's right across from where the Pharaohs, right? Pharaohs used to be. So right across. Beautiful building here. So thank you so much, Greg. Pleasure.
All righty.
This was Offbeat Podcast, guys.